Conservatives fight to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. This Prime Minister is not worth the cost or corruption. We found yesterday that his government is under RCMP investigation.
And I confirm that there is an investigation, and we're not going to comment because it's ongoing.
Thank you. Perfect. Again, this time for a Rive scam. The commissioner of the RCMP revealed, however, that the last time they were investigating him for criminal activity, he blocked them in the SNC-Lavalin affair from getting cabinet documents. So,
paragraph 19 of the RCMP investigation report states that the strongest fury towards an offence of obstruction of justice was that the Prime Minister shuffled Jody Wilson-Raybould out of the position of Attorney General so that a new Attorney General would make a different decision regarding the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin, correct?
That's correct, Mr. Chair. Have to operate within these parameters.
It would seem to me to be part of a pattern of a cover-up.
that's right.
That's what it would seem to me to be. How can the Prime Minister be subject to the rule of law, like every other Canadian, if his personal department can shield him from an RCMP criminal investigation?
Absolutely. So, Mr. Chair, I'll let individuals draw their own conclusion. What I come back to is we operate within a set of regulations and parameters that, unfortunately, we made the effort to go and get additional information, and it was refused.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Two-tier
Thank
system
you.
of justice, I would say.
Thank you, Mr. Cooper.
will he lift cabinet confidentiality and hand over all the documents to the police so that they can investigate any of his potential crimes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the situation around ArriveCan is obviously unacceptable, which is why authorities are looking into this procurement process. And anyone who took advantage of everything we were doing to try and keep people safe during COVID to get rich will face consequences. That's the way our system works.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
But that's not the way the system has worked since he took office 8 years ago. According to the RCMP Commissioner, he not only refused to be questioned in the SNC-Lavalin criminal investigation and in the Aga Khan Billionaire Island investigation, but he blocked key cabinet documents from being included.
We made the effort to go and get additional information, and it was refused.
In those investigations. We now know that an app that was supposed to cost $80,000 went up to $60 million after the NDP helpfully voted for those extra funds. We don't know who criminally benefited from that. So once again, will the Prime Minister waive cabinet confidentiality, turn over all the documents, yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The Leader of the Opposition is digging into the past to try and bring up things that were settled many years ago. But if he really wants to talk about the past, he should talk about the fact that the Conservative leader was at Transport Canada working hand in hand with the minister as the founders of the company involved in ArriveCan were getting millions of dollars in contracts from the department he was working for. Mr. Speaker, we are taking seriously any concerns around procurement. The authorities are looking into it. There will be consequences for anyone who took care of our COVID protection efforts to get themselves rich.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
That answer proves again that he's not worth the cost or the corruption. We know that after 8 years of this Prime Minister, the cost of everything has gone up, in part because he's given away money for nothing. In a Rive scam, an app that was supposed to cost $80,000 was actually how much? $60 million at least, and counting, because the Auditor General says she doesn't have the documentation to do the full calculation. Today, though, we have a common sense Conservative motion that will require the Prime Minister release the full cost of the app and recover the money for Canadians within the next 100 days. Will he vote for that common sense motion? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we see the Leader of the Opposition choosing to fling mud on a question that I've said is unacceptable. The authorities are looking into it. But he doesn't want to talk about the housing investments that we're making across the country. He doesn't want to talk about the fact that he voted against dental care that seniors are going to be benefiting from as of May. He doesn't want to talk about childcare. He doesn't want to talk about Ukraine. He doesn't want to talk about all the things where Conservatives are out of line with Canadians. We're going to continue focusing on the things that matter to Canadians every single day.
This Prime Minister wants to hike the tax. First of all, he wants to quadruple it between now and 2030. And on April 1st, he plans to hike it by 23%, with the support of the NDP. The tax hike will be bigger than any increases in the rebate, and therefore people will be bigger, the average families in all the provinces will be bigger net losers under this tax than they were before. With Canadians unable to eat, heat, and house themselves, will the Prime Minister cancel his plan to hike the tax on April 1st?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
I do believe this might be one of the first times the Leader of the Opposition has ever recognized that there is a Canada carbon rebate that he is going to cancel. Checks that he will prevent from delivering to Canadians right across the country. 8 out of 10 Canadians households get more money than they pay in carbon pricing in the provinces in which they apply. In Alberta, $1,800 a year to a family of 4, $1,200 a year in Manitoba. Even in Ontario, $1,120 to a family of 4 in Ontario. That's money in their pockets that he wants to take.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, I'm glad he mentioned his phony rebates, because $1,800 in Alberta is the rebate. That's what he said. You heard him. Here's the gross cost, $2,943. So he's going to take away $2,943, but give back $1,800, and then ask you to be thankful for it, Mr. Speaker. Isn't that just proof that the carbon tax is just like him, not worth the cost?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer himself recognized that the $1,800 in rebate that we're sending, for example, to a family of 4 in Alberta is more than that family of 4 costs with the price on pollution. That is the calculation that is done right across the country that shows that 8 out of 10 families are better off with the Canada carbon rebate than they pay in the price of pollution in areas in which it's brought in. We are both fighting climate change and delivering more money to households across the country, money that he wants to take away.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget Officer report is in my hands. Page 3 of a distributional analysis of the federal fuel charge under the 2030 emissions reduction plan. Google it. Look it up. It's on the Parliamentary Budget Officer's website. You don't have to believe me, and you certainly don't want to believe him. Go look for yourself. The average Ontario family will pay $1,674 in carbon taxes next year. That's $630 more than they get back in rebates. So why doesn't the Prime Minister Google it, look up the report, check the facts, and axe the tax?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the first and base conclusion.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the first conclusion of the Parliamentary Budget Officer is, in the math, on the face of it, 8 out of 10 families get more back through the price on pollution, through the Canada carbon rebate. The reality is, if one wants to talk about longer-term and broader economic consequences of a price on pollution, you have to talk about the cost of inaction. You have to talk about the benefits of investing and innovating in carbon reduction technologies. That's the full picture that the Leader of the Opposition doesn't want to look at, because he doesn't think you can build a strong economy and fight climate change at the same time.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he's doing neither at the same time. Mr. Speaker, the Parliamentary Budget, first of all, I should catch that word. He said, on the face of it. Carbon tax is terrific. Well, the Parliamentary Budget Officer actually did the calculation of the full fiscal and economic cost for the average family. And he found that every family in the middle class is worse off under the carbon tax. For example, in Ontario, the net cost for the average family above and beyond rebates is $627 this year. How are they going to pay for that?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, families in Ontario going to be getting a Canada carbon rebate worth $1,120 this year. That's a family of 4. A family in Nova Scotia, $824. A family in Saskatchewan, $1,500 this coming year. And that is more for 8 out of 10 families than the price on pollution actually is. We are fighting climate change. We are innovating and creating jobs of tomorrow. And we're putting more money in the pockets of Canadians, checks that leader of the opposition would take away.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, here's a very simple way to measure it up. Right here from the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report. The total gross cost of the carbon tax in Ontario is $1,674 for this coming year. $1,674. $1,674. $1,674. How much is the rebate?
Le très honorable Premier Ministre.
With record-setting wildfires last year, with floods, with climate.
Good suggestion, the Honourable Prime Minister from the top.
Mr. Speaker, with record-setting wildfires across the country, with droughts, with floods, Canadians know the costs of the impacts of climate change. The Leader of the Opposition has no plan to fight climate change. He's not proposing anything except, Mr. Speaker, to pull away both the price on pollution, which forces polluters to pay right across the country, that puts more money through checks that arrive 4 times a year in Canadians' pockets in the jurisdictions where there is a carbon price. We have a plan to fight climate change and put money in people's pockets. He has no plan.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Whoa! He doesn't need to get angry about it. Just asking some numbers here.
Just some numbers.
Right? So he was very anxious to talk about these wonderful rebates up until a moment ago. And now he doesn't want to say a thing about it. He even gave him a fancy new name. I'm going to say it again. In Ontario, the gross cost of the carbon tax is $1,674 for the average family. $1,674. How much is the rebate?
Just the number.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
He suggests that I don't have to get angry about climate change. I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. Canadians are worried and angry about climate change. They see the wildfires cutting across this country last summer that are already started up in Alberta. He sees the droughts. They see the floods. They have no plan. Their plan is to withdraw the 4 times a year checks that land in the bank accounts of Canadians, that the Parliamentary Budget Officer demonstrates gives more money to 8 out of 10 families right across the country in jurisdictions where it's applied. Mr. Speaker, we have a plan. He doesn't.
The NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the cost of food, as we were reminded by a tragic report by Second Harvest that came out this week showing that there will be another million extra visits to food banks above last year's record-breaking numbers. This because of the collusion of the NDP Liberals on price fixing, that is the carbon tax. Will the Prime Minister cancel his April 1st 23% carbon tax hike on food?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, as one of the Conservative leader's own MPs recognized, there is absolutely no data or proof to link their theory around the price on pollution and the price of groceries. But if they actually cared about affordability for Canadians, they would have voted in favor of dental care for our most vulnerable seniors, for young families that can't afford to send their kids to the dentist. That's what we are delivering. They are voting against. They wouldn't be stalling on the competition reforms to ensure that we're actually moving forward on greater competition to stabilize grocery prices.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, after 8 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is just not worth the cost of food. It's not just that 2 million people a month can't afford groceries and are forced to line up at food banks. It's just now that those food banks are running out of food and Canadians are diving into dumpsters. Literally, there's an 8,000 member Facebook group called the Dumpster Diving Network.
Shame.
How can the Prime Minister look those people in the eyes and raise taxes on their food when they're eating out of garbage cans?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we recognize that many Canadians are facing extremely difficult times, which is why we're continuing to step up our supports across the country for food banks, for programs, and for supports for vulnerable Canadians. This is something that we have taken seriously and we will continue to. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we're continuing to move forward on concrete measures to help Canadians, like dental care, like pharmacare, like child care. These are things that the Conservative Party continues to vote against in terms of helping vulnerable Canadians, in helping with affordability. He's there to instrumentalize vulnerable Canadians and try and play politics off of them. He's not there to...
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, that's the best answer he can come up with after 8 years of record food price increases that has forced people not just to food banks, but to literally jump into dumpsters and bring their phones that they can network on Facebook to share tips on how to eat out of garbage cans. In Canada, life was not like this before this Prime Minister, and it won't be like this after he's gone. In the meantime, we'll at least have the humanity to cancel his April 1st 23% tax hike.
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, farmers across this country know the impacts of climate change on the food supply in Canada, on the growing and production of food. These are things that we are fighting against by fighting against climate change and putting more money in the pockets of Canadians right across the country. We will continue to be there with support for food banks. We will continue to be there with support for vulnerable Canadians. Now, the Leader of the Opposition loves to talk about them and try and score political points off of these vulnerable people, but he is offering no real solutions for them as we continue to step up and deliver supports for people from coast to coast to coast.
Tax the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Meanwhile, this Prime Minister has doubled housing costs since he promised to bring them down. A National Bank report out Thursday revealed that in Victoria and Toronto, it now takes an astonishing 25 years for the average family to save for a down payment. And in Vancouver, it's 29 years. This after he's created $80 billion of new housing spending that has been vaporized by bureaucracy. So will he finally follow our common sense plan to cut the bureaucracy and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we just announced 2 more housing accelerator agreements today in Whitehorse and Saskatoon, adding to the dozens of agreements we've signed across the country to fast-track the construction of housing with over 600,000 homes. Now, the Conservative Party plan, which he's talking about, is to insult mayors and cut critical infrastructure funding, and it won't get any more homes built. Cities understand that we need to change the rules to get more homes built faster, and indeed, the only one gatekeeping this progress is the Conservative leader himself.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He pretends he hasn't been in government for the last 8 years. He acts like this is his first day on the job, Mr. Speaker. In fact, that he has to read off notes would suggest it is his first day on the job. But the reality is that housing costs have doubled since he promised to lower them. Yes, he's created massive programs with wonderful new agreements and beautiful photo ops where politicians pat each other on the back and smile while they cut ribbons. The problem is that after 8 years, nothing is getting built. Why won't the Prime Minister get out of the way, cut the bureaucracy, so we can build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, 19 years as a politician, the Leader of the Opposition, including some time as a housing minister, and his plan to fix housing is anything but a plan. It won't build homes fast enough, it doesn't reach enough cities, and it creates unnecessary bureaucracy. He'd also, get this, rip up the housing accelerator agreements, which are unlocking over 600,000 new homes, and he'd put the GST back on apartment construction. Housing experts like Mike Moffat say the Conservative leader's plan is exceptionally weak, and it's a sign that the Conservatives don't understand the urgency or scale of the housing crisis.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He brags that there's a housing crisis after he's been in power for 8 long years. He quotes the same failed liberal academics that gave him the advice that helped him double the price in the first place. Our common sense plan will incentivize cities to speed up and lower the cost of building by requiring they permit 15% more homes as a condition of getting the money. The more they build, the more they get. The less they build, the less they get. We pay builders based on the number of homes they build, realtors on the number that they sell. We should pay municipalities based on the number they permit. Isn't that common sense?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, slogans and buzzwords don't get housing built. Deals, constructive deals with municipalities and provinces do. And Mr. Speaker, we see time and time again, Conservatives have nothing to propose but cuts, conditions, and fights with municipalities, fights with community organizations, crossing their arms and tossing insults at people instead of actually proposing real plans. We are busy working on delivering hundreds of thousands of new homes over the coming years. This is the work that needs to get done. The Conservative leader just needs to get out of the way.
Build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Meanwhile, the NDP Liberal Prime Minister has raised taxes on gas, heat, and groceries, raised taxes on paychecks, raised income taxes on middle-class and lower-income Canadians, raised taxes on small businesses. He keeps raising taxes. It's enough to drive a man to drink, but he wants to tax that too. On April 1st, another 5% increase on beer, wine, and spirits that will kill jobs for those workers and raise costs on consumers. Will he have the humanity to let someone have a drink in peace?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, while the Conservative leader continues to figure out catchy slogans and buzzwords, we're rolling up our sleeves to deliver for Canadians. More housing, dental care, supports for seniors, supports for young families, fighting against climate change while putting more money in their pockets. We are doing the hard work of delivering for Canadians while he proposes nothing but cuts to programs, austerity, and catchy slogans. Mr. Speaker, we need continued responsible approach to government, and that's exactly what we are delivering.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
After reports that the RCMP had to intervene at the Winnipeg labs due to a security breach and great speculation, public speculation of espionage by a foreign dictatorship at that Canadian lab, the Prime Minister fought tooth and nail for any of the documents to come out, including by defying a motion of this House. We found out from a letter written by all parties that had seen the documents, including a Liberal MP, that this was to cover up embarrassment, not protect national security. What did the Prime Minister have to hide?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Ministers will be tabling the documents resulting from this process after question period. But I will note, Mr. Speaker, in this question period, following the 2-year anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the Leader of the Opposition had nothing to say about this war raging in Ukraine, nothing to say to Ukrainian Canadians, as Canada signed security assurances guaranteeing support to Ukraine for the next 10 years. He demonstrates once again he is non-committal in his support towards Ukraine, in his support towards Ukrainians. Mr. Speaker, it's shameful the Leader of the Opposition won't talk about it.